Hi guys, Drea from Aloha Plant Life here, and today I'm going to have you join me while I pot up a succulent cutting that I took a couple of days ago, and I'm going to do something a little bit different today. I'm going to change the camera angle so that you're looking at me doing this process from my point of view. I think it's a little bit easier for you to see exactly what's going on. I'll still be talking you through the whole process, but I just think maybe it's a little bit clearer view to be able to do this well by yourself at home. However, I would like your opinion on if you like videos done this way or not. So please comment below once you've watched this. Let me know if you like the point of view, my point of view versus looking at me here while I'm doing things, or maybe you prefer just looking at me the whole time better, or perhaps you would like to see a combination of the two. Either way, let me know what works best for you guys so I know how to film it in the future to satisfy what you need at home. So with that said, I'm gonna go ahead and get the camera flipped around and we're gonna get started. So we're just gonna go ahead and get started here. Hopefully everything looks okay to you guys. So I've got my tray to work with here. And then I've got a 3-inch pot, which is what I'm gonna be using. Unfortunately, I am still stuck with these flimsy 3-inch ones. My more sturdy ones have not come in yet. I don't know if it's part of the supply chain issues or what it may be, but we're just gonna make do with this today. I am going to be using a slightly different potting mix than what I would normally use for just my regular succulents that already have roots. This is a 50-50, about 50-50 mix of Bonsai Jack's Gritty Mix, which is what I normally put my succulents in. I just use the Gritty Mix by itself. It works pretty well for me, but this time I did half and half, and the other half is just a premium potting soil because we're trying to form roots. And in my experience, you need a little bit more soil to get those roots formed. This still allows for a really good draining medium so that I will be able to leave this succulent in this mix for a while moving forward. So I've got that ready. And I did not film my cutting of this succulent. And part of the reason I did that is I've been waiting for a long time to cut it. And I would say I'm gonna go cut it and then I wouldn't do it. And then I would get like nervous about it. Oh, maybe I'll wait a little bit longer. And so the other day when I finally decided I was gonna cut it, I thought about filming it and I was like, if I get off track and get everything set up to film it, and then I'm gonna lose my nerve and not cut it. So I just went and I cut it. And so I'm sorry we didn't have that on video, but I'll tell you exactly what I did. So this succulent had gotten a little bit leggy. From here, there was also about this much more stem sticking above the soil line. And so what I ended up doing was I went and I cut it with the intent of leaving this remaining 1 inch of stem here so that I had something to stick into the new soil. And I then sat this aside to let this end heal over and callus over. So it's really important with succulents, especially because they retain a lot of moisture in their stems and leaves. You don't want to go straight to potting it because it can get rotted. So you want to put it in kind of a dark place, like you don't need to close it in a drawer or anything, but just a dark counter space, maybe in your kitchen or something where not a lot of light is reaching it, and you want to just let it sit out until this dries and becomes hard like it has. For me, it only took a few days. I am in North Texas, as you guys know, and right now it actually is kind of cold, and so the air has been really dry, and so I think that sped up this process. So this is our little cutting, and this is what's known as the beheading method. So basically you cut off the top of your succulent and you propagate that into soil. Now, let me also show you what I did to the remainder of the plant. So here you can see, this is the pot that it was in, and originally this was 2 plants. I already beheaded the original one of these a while back. So what you're seeing here is new growth on the old stem. You can see the old stem right there. And this is the stem I just cut. And so after I took that cutting, the stem was sticking out about up to here. I went ahead and cut it off close to the soil because I don't want it to start growing already being leggy, right? I want it to grow nice and tight to the soil again. And then I'm just gonna leave it like that. I will say I did water this a few days before I decided to cut it, which in my experience works well because then the plant has enough moisture retained in its leaves and its stems to be okay while it's trying to form the roots. I don't think you should ever try to do it when it's hurting for water, if you know what I mean. So that's kind of how this looks, and then it'll take a while and this will eventually start to grow a new plant as well, just like it did over here. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna fill this cup with this mix, pretty much all the way up to the top. Sorry, jarring the camera there. It's one of the kind of difficult things about filming this way. But I think it's good because you guys get a more direct view of what it would look like while you're doing it. So once we get this most of the way up here, I'm just gonna pack it down a little bit. I like to go ahead and wet the soil first in this instance, rather than putting it in and then re-wetting it. I just find it's a little bit easier to pack it in. So I'm gonna go ahead and wet this soil down completely. Since it is a very gritty mix, I'm not as worried as I am in some of my other videos that you've watched of getting the soil too wet. It's gonna drain out and there's not a ton of actual soil in here. It's mostly that gritty mix, which is rocks and bark and pumice and things like that. I'm gonna let that drip through. So that's pretty good and wet. And I will dump this out when I'm done. And then basically all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my cutting, and you can use, I should have gotten my chopstick out to show you, but you use a chopstick or your finger, or sometimes you can just press it straight down in there without having to do anything. But you're just gonna stick it in there. And then I'm gonna kind of reach under there and make sure I've filled that hole back in most of the way. I'm trying to be careful not to accidentally knock any leaves off or anything. So she's in there now. She's a little bit low in this cup, I will say, but these are my, as I pointed out, not my favorite cups. So I will, after she gets roots here and probably maybe like 3 or 4 months, once she's had time to establish, I'll move her to a better cup and I'll get her to where she's sitting a little bit higher. And actually I'll probably, those other cups I use are a little bit wider across the top, so she won't look so squished in there. Okay, so now that we've got her in there, like I said, you're gonna dump out your excess water. And then, as I've mentioned before in videos, for succulents, you don't need to cover them. You don't wanna cover them like you do some of your other propagations. They don't need the extra humidity. As a matter of fact, it could cause issues with rotting. So you just leave it uncovered. Now, I will say that when she was in this pot, she was living right in a southern facing windowsill. And so she's getting a ton of light here. I'm not going to put this back into that spot just yet. You kind of need to acclimate your propagations. So what I typically would do, and what I did, here I'll show you, I have here, this is the other one that was in that pot that I beheaded, and I beheaded this one, I don't know, probably like 7 or 8 months ago now. So this one should be fully rooted. As you can see, it was quite a bit bigger of a plant than the other one. So I put it in this 4-inch pot, and this is a nice sturdy pot. Same mix and everything, but once I did this, I put this directly in a north-facing windowsill, and I left it there for quite a while. I think about probably a full month. At that point, I knew that the roots had probably started, well, to develop, and I could tell for sure because I kind of tugged on the plant, it wasn't moving. And so then I moved it to a southeast-facing window about a foot back from that window, and I left it there for another few weeks, probably to a month, just to let it get reacclimated to brighter light. And then now it's back living directly in that southern facing windowsill and loving life. So this is what will happen after you propagate and it forms roots. It looks just the same, except now it's not as leggy. She did have some leaves that fell off when I was propagating her, and I stuck them down in the soil to see if they will root. They probably have rooted, but I don't see any additional growth yet, and I'm gonna wait till I see additional growth around them to remove them. I will say, as far as watering goes on these, you do want to kind of keep it a little bit more moist than you would when it's totally full grown and it's living in a pot over here like this. And part of the reason is that it's trying to develop roots. So if you remember, we only went down about 1 inch in that pot. So if that top inch gets dry, now there's nothing to encourage any kind of root development in there. So you kind of want to keep an eye on it. What I basically do is if it gets, about 1 inch down dry, I'll mist the top. I basically don't actually rewater with a watering can for quite a while on these propagations. I just kind of mist, and I get in there, trying not to mist all the foliage, just get down in there, mist it a little bit. Sometimes if it's a little bit difficult like this one, because it's not as wide of a pot as I would have liked it to be, sometimes I'll just use a little what do you call it? Syringe thing that sucks up water that has like kind of a needle nose on it that I can get down in those little spaces and just put just little dribbles of water to just re-wet that top surface, because this bottom part is going to stay wet for a pretty long time. So that's pretty much what I do. If you accidentally let it dry all the way out, by all means in that situation, grab the watering can and re-wet the entire bit of soil. But for the most part, sorry guys, for that first month, you're not gonna need to be re-wetting that soil completely. So I will show you as well one of my other ones. I will say that this one took a really long time to start growing back, way longer than the other one that I beheaded at the same time that I did this one. So just to give you an idea of kind of different growth times coming back, this one I also had beheaded at that same point in time from this pot. There's only one of them growing in here, and you can see how big this is compared to how big this is. That's how much longer it took. For a while there, I thought this wasn't going to grow back because it was just taking so much more time, but it did. And the other thing that you might be thinking, because obviously you can kind of see here how it's not going to grow out of the top, it's going to grow out of the sides. So maybe now you're thinking, oh, well, I'm going to have like a lopsided plant that grows back in here. It's not the case. Eventually it's going to want to get its face, the center of its plant, up towards that light. So as long as you have it in appropriate lighting, you can see here that this one started growing on the side, but you see how it's kind of starting to rotate itself up over the top of that stem. That's what happens. It might take a while, but eventually this is going to be straight up looking normal, just like this one. And as you can probably see here, this is the Bonsai Jack's Gritty Mix just by itself. There's no soil in there. That is what I use. And I'm going to be straight up honest with you guys. There are not drainage holes in either of these ceramic pots. I have never had drainage holes in them. I've never had a problem. I actually have had a bigger problem figuring out correct watering once I put them in these that do have drainage holes. They just, in my experience, have to get watered more quickly out of here. But it is possible to keep plants and succulents alive in pots without drainage. And the trick for me has been figure out how much water your pot will hold. And then you want to do a little bit less, well, more than a little bit less than that, maybe like a third of that amount when you water your plants. So for example, this little one here, I do about a quarter cup of water each time I water it. I really only have to water it once every like 25 to 30 days. And then over here, it's a little bit bigger. So I do close to a cup of water in this one on the same time frame, once every 25 to 30 days. And it has worked really well for me. Other thing that you can do, and I do this frequently, if I know it's been like 20 days or more, I will come and I will just lightly pinch the leaves. And if they feel a bit squishy, especially if the top higher up ones feel a bit squishy, then I know it's ready for water. Obviously you can see this one hasn't been watered as recently as this one because I watered this one a few days before I beheaded it. And you can see the color difference in that mix as well. So that's another good indicator. And if you were here holding it, this one actually weighs a lot more than this one right now. So I know this one's well watered. I'm not gonna have to touch it for another 30 days or so. This one's probably about, I don't know, 15 days away from needing to be watered again, I would guess. But it can be done if you have pots that you want to use that don't have drainage holes. So basically that is it for potting up these succulents. I will do a follow-up video once it has gotten fully rooted so you can see how it's doing. And that is one of the nice things about these flimsy cups that I keep complaining about, is that at least they're see-through. My other 3-inch ones aren't, so this will be fun because we'll be able to actually see when the roots are growing and everything. So I'll be sure to do that follow-up video for you guys. Thanks for joining me. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. And of course, as always, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I would greatly appreciate it. And any comments on any future videos you'd like to see are always welcome. You guys have a great day and aloha.